What is the ultimate fast estate car? The BMW M3 Touring or the Audi RS6 Performance? Keep watching to find out.
It seems like every month now there's another unveil of a new fast SUV. They're tall, they're heavy, and they're rarely in oil painting, but they're always very popular, which is why manufacturers make so many of them. However, if you want something very fast that's also blessed with excellent practicality, then there's another, better way of doing it. Welcome to the Audi RS6 and the BMW M3 Touring. Right now, they're the finest examples of fast estate cars that money can buy, and today, I'm going to tell you which one is better.
Now, I've also brought along my esteemed colleague, Mr. Ben Barry, who is not only a connoisseur of fast estate cars, but he's also been running one of these, the M3 Touring, for the last few months. So you should know everything there is to know about dailying this lovely green car, and I assume you enjoyed it?
I did, yeah. I mean, I've been running it for the last 6 months or so, 7,000 miles, and it's such a complete car. I love it. It's a fun thing to drive. It's got a real wild side when you switch it into rear-wheel drive mode. But then I've loaded it with luggage, the family, Christmas presents, driven it through, you know, the winter, some pretty foul conditions, and really lent on its all-wheel drive. So very, very complete car, I'd say, yeah.
Good, I'm jealous.
Thing is, with the M3 Touring, it's not quite a like-for-like rival with the RS6. Yes, they're both fast estates, but they're priced and sized slightly differently.
To demonstrate the latter, we thought we'd line the two cars up, and while the M3 Touring isn't exactly small, the RS6 is 20 centimetres longer, 5 centimetres wider, and 1.5 centimetres taller. It's also about 200 kilograms heavier at 2,090 kg.
We can also see that while the RS6 doesn't have the handy opening boot window, it does have a little more space for luggage and passengers in the rear seats. So if you're the kind of person that prioritises luggage and passenger space above all else, then get the RS6, or better still, let's go to Superb. However, while the BMW may be smaller than the RS6, it is also cheaper, starting from just under £88,000 versus the Audi, which is £115,000. And, as Ben is about to tell you, there really isn't that much difference in cabin quality.
So we can't talk about this interior without talking about these carbon fibre seats. They're part of the Ultimate Pack, so when this car was spec'd, that Ultimate Pack was just under £12,000. If you get them separately, they're just under £4,000 now, and I think they look fantastic. They hold you really nicely once you're into them, very comfortable and supportive. I've done long journeys in this car and found them great, and I love this seating position, very BMW, extremely low down on the ground and just absolutely perfect. I think one thing I would say is they're pretty firm when you climb into them, so very rock hard edges here that can make them a bit uncomfortable. And when I tried the standard seats recently, actually they don't look quite as good, but I think all things considered in terms of that comfort of getting in and out of the car and the cost, I think I would stick with the standard seats. Now this generation of 3 Series grew by 41mm in the back. So actually, if you're thinking about the RS6 and there's more space in the RS6, well, there is, but there isn't quite the difference that there used to be. And the space in the back of this, you know, there's plenty of room for adults back here. So it's definitely an all-round family choice. The M3 Touring has always had this curved display infotainment system, but when the M3 first launched the Saloon and the M4 Coupe, it came with 2 separate screens. So I do like this system. I think it looks really good. There are a few compromises on it, I would say, though, as well, in terms of the climate menu. That's all digital now. So you've got physical buttons for clearing the screen and the rear window, but everything else, you have to go onto the screen. As these things go, actually, it's a good interface. You press the buttons up and down to adjust the temperature. You have to dip into this climate menu, press the button here, and you've got things like control over the seats and stuff. Ultimately, I think I prefer physical buttons, but as these things go, this is pretty good. We've also got, I'm not so sure about all the tabs on this screen up here. It's a bit of a mess of tabs to sort through and go through, so I could live without that. I love the M1 and M2 buttons on this screen. So if you know your M cars, you know that you can group your preferences in M1 and M2. So for instance, things like suspension, engine and steering stiffness, even brake pedal firmness, you can group that under your M1 and M2 buttons after setting them up down here. So you press setup, group them all under here, so engine, chassis, steering, brake, and also the four-wheel drive system, MX Drive, which can go between four-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, and also four-wheel drive sport. The one thing I have found from living with this car on a daily basis is that I've got my daily settings under M1 and kind of maybe more like track settings under M2, and there've been times when I've thought, I'm in comfort damping, but I want really to go to sport damping for a twistier road or something. In the last generation, the F80, you could just press the damper button here, but on that moment, you kind of have to go back into setup, find your chassis, go to sport. So it's a little bit more of a faff in terms of that, but overall, yeah, it works well. You can also change the display on the instrument binnacle by pressing this M mode button here and then scrolling through the different modes. I think that's a little bit odd, to be honest, because one, it says M mode, which makes you think you're changing the driving modes, and also really with it being this instrument binnacle, it would make more sense like Audi does to have the control up here. So you press M mode and then you scroll through road, sport or track. To be honest, because it's down there, I've generally just left it in road.
So now climb into the Audi RS6, and the cabin is actually very similar to a regular Audi A6, but then that's no bad thing because it is a very nice place to sit and it is very high quality. There's a few different details. So we've got the Alcantara suede feeling material on the steering wheel, which is very nice indeed. We've got different gear shift panels, there's different graphics on the digital dashboard display, and there's also some nice details such as the carbon on the door, the stitching and on the carpets as well. So you know that you're in an RS6, but it is quite a subtle change. Now, the infotainment system, I think, is one of the best on the market. It's super easy to use. It's spread across two screens, and although it perhaps isn't quite as snappy as the BMWs and there isn't perhaps as many options, it does all the important things really well indeed. And as I said, it's just really straightforward, which is what you want from an infotainment system. Now, the seats in this RS6 are very different to the ones in the BMW. Ben likes the seats in the BMW. I like them as well, actually, but I know a lot of people that don't like them. They think they're too serious. And if you were going to get the standard seats, they'd be more similar to these because they're nowhere near as aggressive with the bolstering and they look a lot more like conventional car seats. But I think these do hold you in pretty nicely. They look quite cool with the stitching as well, and they're very comfortable on a long journey. So no complaints about where I'm sitting. The driving position, well, I don't think you can go quite as low as you can in the BMW. That's one of the big features, is how low you can sit in that. But it doesn't feel like you're sitting too high either when you're in the lowest position. So I think it's a decent compromise in here. I also want to point out the RS mode button on the steering wheel. So in the M3 Touring, you've got M1 and M2, two different buttons. On this, you've just got one button, but that allows you to access your RS1 and RS2 preset drive modes. Now, just like the BMW, you can't change those modes on the fly using physical buttons because there aren't any at all. You have to go into the menu system, which is a bit of a shame, but then, as I said, it doesn't lose out to the BMW in that respect. What it does mean is that you can access your favorite drive modes if you spy a good road or a roundabout that you want to go into at a healthy speed, and you can just click it and it brings you into a firmer suspension, better throttle response, better gearbox response, all of those things. So that's very good. So overall, a lovely place to sit. Some subtle reminders that you're in the top of the range RS6 model, and it does the basics right. So pretty much like the M3 Touring. I don't think there's a huge amount to split the two cars in this respect.
Clearly, we needed to investigate further to come up with a winner. So, Ben braved the rain and rediscovered why he's such a big fan of the BMW M3.
Always loved my M3s, but I have to admit, when I went on the press launch for the previous generation, the F80 in 2014, I did come away a little bit confused. It was the first one with a twin turbocharged engine. So just like this car, it was a 3-litre twin turbo straight six, but it had a very sort of diesel-y, turbo diesel character to it, both in its sound signature and the way it delivered its power in quite low down and encouraged you to short shift. And that generation, I also thought they drove like trucks, especially at first. They felt quite heavy and just a bit sort of flat-footed, really. So the brilliant thing about this car is it feels really light on its feet, yet it's 1,865 kilos din for the M3 Touring. That's a good 200 kilos or more heavier than the previous model. But the reason it feels so light on its feet, a key part of that is the steering. It's very, very quick off center. It's very light to the point that I would switch it into the sport mode to give it a bit more meat. And it's just very responsive, and it really snaps this car alive and gives it a lot of energy. The other big step was with this engine. It's the S58 engine, so still 3-litre twin turbo straight six, but it sounds much better than it did before. It's got a much more organic, kind of natural BMW straight six sort of sound. And I think it's just got, they've just recalibrated it, so you've still got that low down torque, but it drip feeds in a much more natural sort of way. So if you're daily driving it, you can short shift and use the torque, but if you want to wind it right out, it'll do that too. So really encourages you to reach for those sort of high notes in this engine in a way that the other car didn't. Ooh. Now we've got it in the four-wheel drive mode at the moment, so as you probably know, new M3, first one with optional all-wheel drive. It's standard in the case of the M3 Touring. We've got 3 modes: regular four-wheel drive sport, and fully rear-wheel drive. Now I've got it in four-wheel drive sport at the moment, which is how I've got it in my M1 button for daily driving. So traction control in its mid setting, so a little bit of extra freedom, a little bit of extra leash, and it's a really, really potent combination actually, because this car's got a nice strong front end, encourages you, even when it's a bit wet like this or very wet like this, that you've got the bite at the front to get it tucked in, and you've also got the security of all-wheel drive, but a very rear biased feeling, so a very kind of adjustable handling balance, as you can probably see there. And yeah, just a great sort of combination of traction with that kind of adjustability that I really love. I think the damping works really well in this car. It flows cross-country very nicely. It's got a lot of compliance to it. I usually have it in the comfort setting. Sometimes on a road like this, you can start to feel it maybe becoming a little bit loose, particularly at the rear, in which case, sometimes sort of switch it up to sport, tightens it up, but you do get that sort of trade-off in ride quality. So most of the time, I am generally in this comfort mode. We've got the carbon ceramic brakes on this car as part of the M Pro pack. I think they are a good upgrade, especially on a car as heavy as this. I have noticed that during the time I've had this car, the pedal seems to have got a bit longer, so I just dab it with my left foot there. It's quite a lot of travel before it picks up, but ultimately strong stopping power and good modulation other than that initial kind of bite, I would say. The gearbox, we've got an 8-speed auto gearbox, but it does, versus, the original dual clutch gearbox when the M3, the F80 came in, and the previous generation, I'm getting my E92, the V8 model with dual clutches. This doesn't quite have that snap, but it's a very, very good compromise in that you've got very, very punchy gear shifts. In fact, of these 3 settings, I generally have it on the second one because I find the third one a bit unnecessarily punchy. Driving around in the wet like this, I am aware of how much grip I've got and the feel and when it's starting to slip, but I would say overall, it is perhaps a little bit more isolated than I would want, so I'd want a bit more sort of texture through the steering just to get an even clearer sense of what's going on. So on the flip side of that, I think the downside of having this car be so entertaining on a road like this is it can be, quite stiff jointed at low speed, and you do get some road roar, at higher speed and things like that. So it's not the perfect daily, but it is a brilliant do everything sort of family wagon.
As predicted then, the M3 Touring is as exciting to drive as a BMW M car should be. But can the Audi RS6 swap out some of that performance for better usability? To find out, I rode shotgun with Ben and quickly realised that in a straight line at least, there's been no compromise on outright speed.
It feels quicker than the M3 Touring. I mean, it's got more power, 621 brake horsepower versus 503, and then 621 pounds-foot of torque versus 479 pounds-foot.
Yeah. I think it's got bigger turbos in this car, so it takes a little bit of time to get up and running, but once it does, it really kicks hard. That mid-range, all that extra torque, even though this car is quite a lot heavier, it just really gives you that sort of shove, doesn't it? It's a lot of power.
It really is, and I think because they've taken away, I think it's about 8 kilos of sound deadening from the engine bay, you can really hear that extra rumble. It feels more raucous than I remember on the pre-performance version.
It's a nice exhaust note, isn't it? It's I really like the M3. I like that. I think it's improved a lot over the previous M3 as well, but you cannot beat that sort of V8 rumble that this car's got.
Yeah, it's just in that mid-range shove, and the sound just feels more authentic. With the BMWs, you can tell it's being piped in and it's not as authentic. It's not as fizzy at the top, I think, in this, but that rumble in the mid-range is fantastic. Wow.
Really picks up and goes, doesn't it? I think versus the M3 is that it's very, very punchy in a straight line. It's not as adept in the corners though. It just hasn't, as you'd expect, but it's just not got that bite.
Okay, so you think it's the front end bite where you think it's lacking versus the M3 then?
Yeah, the traction is very much more four-wheel drive feeling than the M3 in terms of distributing power evenly. So if I accelerate there, it just hooks up and goes. And actually, because there was a bit of lag there as well, it just was slightly dead in that corner. But it's generally, you've got that feeling that it's more evenly distributed between all 4 wheels. But it's not keying into the corner as you turn in, so that's kind of inhibiting confidence more than the idea that it's going to spit sideways.
No, I get it. And you don't think the new diff, because that can send up to 80% of the power to the back, that's not really making as much of a difference as you'd think it would?
I think you can feel it going towards the back, but it's certainly not as extrovert as the M3, I would say,
Yeah. And in terms of usability, how do you think this compares to the M3 Touring? Because the ride feels pretty good to me. I mean, we're on the optional 3-way adjustable dampers. It's standard air on this, but this is top spec, so we've got those fancy dampers.
This is coils, so it is standard on air, but this is on coils, so you've got the diagonally interlinked dampers, and as a daily, I think that's where this car really kind of stretches and makes a case for itself.
Yeah.
It's really comfortable, the seats are more comfortable, the suspension is really cushy. What I have been finding is that I'll have it in comfort around town and it's great, but I struggle to find a mode that's just right for me when I start to drive faster. So it's got that stretch to usability, but I feel the lack versus the M3 when I come to twistier corners.
Now, I want to ask you about the steering as well, because the BMW steering is incredibly sharp. Some people might say a little bit too quick and too sharp. This, looking at your inputs, seems a bit different.
Yeah, an Audi engineer actually said they thought the M3 steering was too quick. This, to me, I don't like this steering, basically. There's something odd going on. I presume it's the Audi's progressive steering. I'm not getting just not getting the sense of turning the car into the corner that I hoped I would. Just making the front end's not biting as well as it could, and also the steering is just not quite, just not very natural feeling for me.
It's not as clean.
No.
What do you think of the tyres?
I'm not. Yeah, it's difficult to know. I think I don't like them.
Oh dear, oh dear. So that was understeer and oversteer pretty much almost at the same time there.
Oh yeah, quite a combination.
Yeah.
So that was just on the edge of being front limited, and then it started to come round.
Yeah.
So I prefer just having a cleaner front end and being able to sort out the rear, which the M3 does.
I mean, what I like about this is that it feels when we're going along here at about 7 or 8 tenths.
Yeah.
It's quite composed and it feels like it's well damped, but then when you start to go a little bit harder, that's when it starts to feel like this is an optimally 8 tenths car. And if you go further than that, that's when you'll start to feel it struggle more than you would going beyond 8 tenths in the BMW.
Yeah, it feels like it's got a heavy engine in the front, and as you turn it into corners and you've got some tricky undulations and stuff, it's just starting to move then a little bit, wasn't it? But the body control starts to become too loose for me, and actually it is a compromise, and what the RS6 is good at is knowing what people actually want and how they use the car, and I think it is optimum for that kind of person who wants something quick. They're not going to spend ages, hardly any time hooning around corners and stuff. They want a quick, capable car, and that's what it does. But when you start to put something this big and 2 tons down a narrow, twisty road, you do start to feel its limitations in terms of body control. And when I go into auto mode, I also start to feel, when I'm driving quickly, I start to feel like the mode isn't quite there for me, whether it's comfort, whether it's auto, whether it's dynamic, it's just not quite a sweet spot, I think.
Optional carbon brakes, anything to say about those? Are they
Well, let's give them a try, shall we? If I stop now.
That's stopping more than 2 tons that quickly.
Pretty strong.
Yeah.
How's your stomach, all right?
Yeah, good. Yeah, I just had lunch, but no, that worked pretty well. Okay, so the brakes are excellent, but from a dynamic point of view, is there anything that you prefer about the RS6 to the M3 Touring? Because I'm getting the feeling that the point of this is that it is perhaps an everyday estate car. It's on a level, maybe even a little bit better, but when it comes to the dynamics, the M3 has got pretty much a clean sweep.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything, there's no reason that I would take this down a favourite road versus the M3 to enjoy driving it. I think the M3 does have it pretty soundly whipped in that case, but yeah, it's that priority that Audi has put on this being the daily driver and probably meeting more of a typical driver's needs. And you know, if I was to put my family in one car and take them on a longer trip, I'd put them in this car. So, you know, what do you actually want? And I think this is really well judged in so many ways.
Having spent a lot of time in both the M3 and the RS6, Ben and I both agreed on 2 key points. The BMW feels like a performance car in an estate body, while the Audi feels like an estate with a rocket ship engine. What's more, if, like many buyers, your fast estate will go alongside another performance car in your 2 or 3 car garage, the RS6, with its superior comfort and space, might make more sense. However, if it's your only car, the M3 Touring is the best option because it delivers a markedly better driving experience with little in the way of usability compromises. As such, it is the winner of this test and the car that both of us agreed would be the one we'd spend our hard-earned cash on. Do you agree with our verdict? Well, let us know in the comments section below, and while you're at it, make sure you subscribe to the Car Magazine channel and turn your notifications on so you don't miss any future videos.